All right, we're live. I'm not even going to do a countdown because I'm ready to just get going. So, welcome, folks. Those of y'all that are on the YouTube page watching this, welcome to what was called the Waxland Weekly. However, with it being the United Athletic Conference, I think we need a new name. So, if you're watching, put it in the comments. We can look for new names for the show. But for those of you who don't know me, I am Dustin Helton, also known as the Rev. Joining me is a very, very esteemed guest, one of my favorite FCS writers. Honestly, I think the best one out there, and one where it looks like I'm threatening him at the national championship in a photo we took at a bar. But Mr. Sam Herder, part of Hero Sports, is joining me today. Sam, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me on. And yeah, that was a fun photo we took because we were at some bar I can't remember in Frisco, Plano area, and all the FCS fans. I think we had like 8 different teams represented, and everyone was doing like their hand, whatever for logo for their team or their hand gesture, or whatever the horns up or that it looked like you were pointing a gun, right at my head. And I was looking at the picture, I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I felt a little bad about that afterwards, but I still
No,
thought it was
no,
pretty
no.
funny.
Yeah,
That's how I got Sam on the podcast. Just took it really
yeah.
threatening. No, real quick though, pardon if you guys see this and I look a little sweaty. Had a little air conditioning issue at the house, and for those of you who don't know, Texas has been hotter than the seventh layer of hell. But it gives you an opportunity to promote the FCS Fans Nation sponsor, who is Walk On Apparel. I don't know if you guys have seen their stuff yet, but they make some pretty sweet shirts. They've got Eastern Washington, Idaho, this guy right here, Utah Tech, that I'm repping for the conference. But go check them out. Their website, Walk On Apparel. I believe they're Walk underscore on apparel on Twitter, or maybe it's walk on underscore apparel. I can't remember, but you can go find them. Um, you know, go check out their stuff. A portion of the money actually goes back to the schools as well. So it's a pretty cool clothing company started by fans of the FCS. So, awesome. So anyway, Sam, we finally have the WAC and the ASUN combined as a conference. Granted, the NCAA doesn't want to recognize them. They're still a conference. They still have, scheduling that works where it's not like it was last year where teams weren't playing each other. They are under the United Athletic Conference, or as it's being called by Dakota Mayhem, the Airlines Conference, because that logo does look like a United Airlines logo from the 1990s. I actually think it's going to look great on the turf. I've seen the photo of Central Arkansas's field, and it's a really good looking logo when it's laid out on the turf. To me, this conference, I think, has a lot more parity than folks realize. I feel like from top to bottom, with the exception of maybe Northern Alabama, there's not much of a gap between the teams and where they could finish. I mean, I think there's 2 tiers. I think there's 3 teams that are going to be in the race for the championship. And then there's the second tier, and then there's North Alabama. So what I would like to hear, just, top to bottom, what are your thoughts on the conference?
Yeah, I wrote about this earlier this week, previewing the UAC, and I basically said that there's no tier one FCS teams in this conference, and really there's probably only 2 or 3 tier one FCS teams in general. There's probably no tier two teams in this conference, but you probably have a lot of tier three teams as far as teams that are in the 20 to 40 range, in the FCS, in the upper third of the FCS. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of these teams individually, but, Eastern Kentucky made the playoffs last year. Parker McKinney coming back, one of the, top quarterbacks in the FCS. The more I look at Central Arkansas, the more I like. I think they, with the amount of talent they had, I'm surprised that last year they were so up and down. So I think Central Arkansas has massive potential. Abilene Christian, keeps on getting better and better. They went 7-4 last year. I believe they went to UND, who always plays well at home, and that they made them a pretty, they made that a pretty competitive game. SFA, I know didn't meet expectations last year, but you always kind of look at SFA as a team with potential. Austin P, where they're at now compared to 10 years ago, night and day. Southern Utah, they were, what they win like 2 or 3 Big Sky titles in the mid 2010s, haven't been all that relevant, but they were really competitive last year. They had a bunch of games that were 1 point, they were 1 score losses. Tarleton State, Utah Tech, coming up from Division Two. Tarleton is really emphasizing football and pouring resources into there. Utah Tech, I think, has really been battle tested, in their first few seasons with their schedule. And then North Alabama is still a program that I think has potential. just with where they're located, their Division II success. I think the potential is there, but obviously when you let go of your coach, yeah, that obviously means things aren't going well. But so it's not it's not a power conference, but it's also not the NEC by any means. I think it's overall you look at these programs and they all have up and down the line, it's all pretty good program names.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. And real quick, our buddy Zach, who, if you haven't checked out the Blue Bloods, you should check it out. Says two legends on the show tonight. Now, granted, one of us is an FCS legend, and that's Stam. I'm more of a karaoke legend, but appreciate the
Yeah.
comment there, Zach. So when you look at like UCA, they brought in Shaderick Powell in at running back, but they also still had Darius Hale. How do you see them running that offense? Do you think it will be a full running back by committee, or do you think Hale is going to get kind of pushed to the back burner? I mean, he is such an insane talent to get pushed aside. Maybe he's not pushed aside by Powell, but to have two potent running backs like that in the backfield, how do you think Coach Brown is going to be able to balance that?
Yeah, there's a lot of weapons on this offense. And so that's what, I really like about this UCA team. I think, defensively, I really like their defensive line with Jessup and David Walker. But offensively, I mean, Will McElvain is a veteran quarterback. He's coming back this year for UCA. I think he's a solid quarterback. I believe his number one receiver is coming back. It might be his number one and two receivers are coming back. But then, you balance that out with the rushing attack. And Darius Hale is, freshman All-American, sophomore All-American. His two first seasons, he's been really, really good. Like his freshman year, he ran for like 20 touchdowns or something like that. Crazy. And then last year, I believe he was right over 1,000 yards rushing as well. And then you bring in Shaderick Powell, a transfer from within the conference who was also an All-American level name. And so I think they can balance each other out. They're two different running styles, I guess, a little bit. And so, maybe they can balance things out that way. But you can never have enough running backs. That's, the one position that probably gets beat up on the most. And so having I guess you can have two go-to guys, in the running game. That's good to have, but you balance that with what should be a pretty good passing attack. And I think this UCA team is. I think I said at the start, like they're a really talented team. And I know our friend Jamie Williams, he tallied up because I did the top 25 returners by position, and he tallied up which teams had the most. And South Dakota State had the most. I think Montana State was right there, but Central Arkansas had like the fourth most guys, on my top 25 position rankings. And so the talent is there. It's just being more consistent week to week. And I think they can, string a lot of wins this year.
Yeah, they've got some tests. They got to go to Fargo and go play North Dakota State in week 3, I think. And I think that'll be a true test of where they are in terms of how they were last year and just failing to just get over the hump. When I look at the conference, it's really hard to bet against Eastern Kentucky right now as a favorite to win because of the success that they had last year. They're bringing back Parker McKinney at quarterback, and he has his weapons. Although their losing in the playoffs to Gardner Webb is a little bit embarrassing if you think about it between the two. I mean, I'm not saying Gardner Webb was a bad team, but it was a game that you would expect a team like Eastern Kentucky with the season they had to go through easily. How do you see them doing? Do you see them making the return to the playoffs, or do you think that they might stumble through the regular season?
I am probably the most high on Eastern Kentucky out of this conference. I do think they have a great shot to go back to the playoffs. A big part of that is Parker McKinney, coming back coming back for his 6th year. I know he probably had multiple NIL offers to go to the FBS, but he decided to come back to EKU for his 6th year. He's already got numerous school records for EKU, and so I think that's the big part for EKU. Overall, they only bring back 2 all conference guys. They also add an all conference guy, Lucas Raber from Davidson, tight end, and so you kind of look at who else can step up. They do lose a lot defensively, but offensively, McKinney leads that. They also, I believe, have their number 1 receiver coming back. Jaden Smith is his name, and so I expect them to put up a lot of points. It's just that defense. I say it a lot when you're winning games 45-35 in the regular season, even if you are 6-2, I still kind of question, what kind of damage can you do in the playoffs, because that's just not the style you want to make a deep playoff run. And we saw that last year in the playoffs when I don't have the stats in front of me, but EKU threw for like 500 yards and Gardner Webb ran for like 500 yards, and it was just back and forth. And that's just not it's fun to watch for me and for us, but that's just not the style you want for more FCS playoff success. And so I think defensively is a big question for them. I know they brought in close to 10 FBS transfers, most of them on the defensive side of the football. And so if that gels, I think EKU is, in my opinion, probably in like the 18 to 25 range. You can probably slot them anywhere in there for the preseason.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think I had them at 22 in my poll that I finally put out, even though we had this discussion and I
Yeah.
was called a hack by Sean Anderson. But you know what? If you haven't watched the Hack City poll discussion, you should. And to be fair, I think folks thought I was going to be upset about what he said, and I think he was spot on. Like you shouldn't criticize a poll unless you're going to put one out yourself and explain it. So I did. Anyway, so another team I put in my top 25 that I think some folks are sleeping on because they don't know much about him or they think back to where they were, say, this time 10 years ago, is Austin P. They have just gone, like you said earlier, have gone night and day in the past decade. They've really grown year over year, first in the OVC and then moving into the ASUN and now the United or UAC or whatever folks want to call it. I think they're a dark horse to win the conference. And maybe it's not a dark horse, so I put them in my top 25, but I just think a lot of folks are sleeping on what they're doing there.
Yeah, Jamie and I actually had this discussion a little bit about Austin P. And the more I look at Austin P, I'm just not there on them. I know they were right on the playoff bubble last year, and had a decent argument to get in. And I know they're building something there. They continue to build something. Austin P, I think, had at one point like. I can't remember what the number was, but it was a FCS record losing streak. And then they turned it around, and I think 2018 they were like 6-5, and then 2019 made the playoffs and beat Sac State. And so I respect what they've done. I just, the more I look at their roster, the more I'm not there as far as putting them in my top 25. I like the quarterback coming back, Mike DeLillo. I think he's a great talent, and so you start with the quarterback position, and that is promising. But Austin P does lose. It's right around 10 transfers to the FBS. Some big names as well. Dre McCray, he was a really good wide receiver for them. He's gone. D Ford, he went to Arizona State, and so he's gone as well. Shamari Simmons, another defensive back, he also went to Arizona State, and so I think they lose a lot of talent, and I just don't know. Who's going to come in and step up and fill those roles. I know they also brought in some FBS transfers, so I'm just not there right now on Austin P. I think they could be like a 6-5-ish team, but I just don't think they're preseason top 25 material for me.
Yeah, but for me, it's really hard to root against Scotty Walden. Like, I absolutely love him as a coach. I think he's my second favorite coach in the FCS. After the team we're going to next, and Colby Carthel. Yep, that's a homer thing. I don't care. I absolutely love Colby Carthel and what he's done. Now we know that SFA last year was 8, 9, 10 in the preseason polls. They did not perform as expected. One of the reasons why I now hate preseason polls. But the biggest thing that had happened last year is obviously they lost a lot of their defensive coaching staff, and again that happened again this season. This offseason they brought in some new folks. They brought in months from Tulane and to on the staff. They, with Xavier Gibson now playing for the Jets in the preseason, with Trey Self gone, they're having a bit of a battle in the quarterback room. Although I think Brian Maurer should probably be the starter because in seeing how he played last year, he played real well. SFA does return a lot of folks on the line. They do return some of their defensive stars. Takai Lloyd is coming back. So do you think SFA has the means to perform this year like they should have last year?
Yeah, so with SFA, it's kind of the opposite with Austin P, because Austin P, I don't have a question mark about the quarterback, but I have question marks about all the other positions. With SFA, you mentioned Gibson and Self now gone, and that was such a huge part of that team, and so that's my big question mark is quarterback there. But you look everywhere else with SFA, and they have a lot of guys coming back, 10 all conference players coming back. And that's the most out of the United Athletic Conference. And it's a little different because I think, the ASUN only did a first team last year, and the WAC I think they did a first and a second team. And so it's not technically fair to compare, returning all WAC players to all ASUN players, but still, 10 all conference players coming back for SFA. That's a good number. I think the offensive line should be pretty good. Some talent there on the defensive line and at linebacker. SFA it's one of those things where you almost kind of wonder if the media set them up for failure. If SFA was preseason number 25 last year, maybe we're looking at SFA different because they missed the playoffs. They were number 25, and so not huge expectations. But when you go from top 10 preseason rankings to missing the playoffs, then you kind of almost just fall. I don't want to say completely off the radar of the FCS media because that's not true, but you kind of just you don't think of SFA, quite the same. And so I looked at SFA, but I didn't really consider, putting them in my top 25 just because, do have some question marks for me. But, I've said often about, different programs that have, I guess promise as far as, FCS teams that can step up that have the potential. I mean, I always point to SFA as far as being that team that has potential that can be, that more Southern based FCS team that can be making more noise nationally. And I thought we were going to get that last year with SFA. Things obviously didn't work out that way, but, I think SFA at least has the building blocks to, kind of get back toward getting more respect in the top 25, I guess.
Yeah, no, I wish we had done it last year, especially with it being Sam Houston's last year in FCS before they went off to Conference USA with Jacksonville State. It was the year I think that SFA had, like, it was the perfect setup, and then of course they failed. I have a question that ties this about the rest of the FCS, but I'll get to that one to the end. I think there's one other team that folks could consider a dark horse in the conference, and that's Abilene Christian. Bringing in Patterson in the coach again, you've seen a complete 180 on that team. What are your thoughts on them, and do you think that they'll surprise some folks this year?
Yeah, actually, I came out with my game by game predictions for Incarnate Word today, and I think UIW has a really good shot to go 10-1. But the one loss might be a surprise. I picked them to lose to Abilene Christian because I think that's at ACU. It's after. I think it's week 3 for UIW, and so I think UIW can beat UTEP, and then they'll probably hammer Northern Colorado. And I think that Abilene Christian game is could be a splash game for ACU to get on the national radar because they were quietly right on the FCS bubble last year, playoff bubble, right on the top 25 bubble. 7-4 record that was improved from 6-5 the previous year, which was way improved from the COVID shortened 2020 season where I think Abilene Christian went like 1-5 or 1-6, and so they've steadily gotten better. I think the overall talent on the team has gotten a lot better. They have some good talent coming back. They're bringing in 14 FBS transfers. So again, roster wise, talent wise, I think they're continually getting better and better. Last year I'm pretty sure I didn't pull this up, but I'm pretty sure last year Abilene Christian brought in the most FBS transfers for an FCS team. If not number one, they were top 3, and that worked out in their favor because they increased their record by 2 wins. Now you bring in 14 more FBS transfers. That's where I kind of go, how do things gel? Because we saw last year with Samford, they brought in double-digit FBS transfers, and they went from like 4-7 to the quarterfinals. Missouri State brought in a lot of transfers before the 2021 season. They got much better. They brought in like 10 more FBS transfers in the 2022 season, coupled with a majority of their starting lineup coming back. Missouri State went from like 8 wins to like 4 or 5. And so just because you're bringing in more talent, as weird as it sounds, that doesn't mean things are going to keep on progressing. But I do like what Abilene Christian is building. I do think they have potential. Where did I slot them? I think I had Abilene Christian. Yeah, I had them 3 behind Central Arkansas and Eastern Kentucky. And so, I think ACU is a team on the rise.
It's funny how SFA and ACU have now kind of become this rivalry just by necessity and geography as well. But their games last year, both of them were just, nuts, especially the first one in Nacogdoches. That was one of the craziest endings to a game I've ever seen in my life. You talked about the transfers in Missouri State, and I was going to make a joke about it being a motorcycle wreck of a season for them, but we can let that go. I feel like too, one last like area to touch on in the conference. I feel like the Utah schools get overshadowed because feel like they're kind of forgotten about because they're such an outlier in the geography of the conference because now everything else is Texas based or in the southeast. Um, do you think folks are sleeping on like Southern Utah? I don't know if Utah Tech is quite there yet, although they have improved, year over year. I just think they need some time. But do you think folks might be sleeping on Coach Fitzgerald and Southern Utah?
Yeah, I think so because I think I touched on it earlier that they were very competitive last year and they finished 5-6 overall, and four of those losses were by 7 points or less. And so I do think they're building back up. I really like Justin Miller. He is probably the second best quarterback in the conference. Off the top of my head, obviously McKinney is number one, but I think Justin Miller from Southern Utah is a really great case to be that number two quarterback in the conference. And so you start there with the quarterback position. I mean, Southern Utah has, they were a really goofy team in the Big Sky in the mid 2010s because like there was they would win the Big Sky and then the next year they would miss the playoffs and then they would win the Big Sky the following year and then they would miss the playoffs again, and then so they were kind of going off and on a little bit. And if I remember correctly, the Big Sky schedule kind of had a little bit to do with with that up and down. But I mean, Southern Utah has sent guys to the NFL, guys that are still in the NFL, and so they have shown the ability to recruit. New regime, new coaching staff since then. But I do think, Southern Utah is another team that I use the word potential a lot, but I just think there's a lot of FCS teams that can do more than what they've been doing lately, and I think Southern Utah falls in that mix. Utah Tech is, I don't know what to make of them because it's hard to look at their overall record because I mean, one year they played like South Dakota State, Montana, Sam Houston. They played like four top 10 teams in their second year in the FCS. And so you're obviously battle tested, but at the same time, you also have to wonder about the psyche of the team when you're getting beat up on like that. But I think Utah Tech is, I don't think they're going to be a bottom dweller for long. Another team that maybe has potential to kind of be in the middle of the pack and just keep on competing better and better as they transition from D2.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's actually going to help them too is the name rebrand. Going from Dixie State to Utah Tech, changing the logo. I mean, their new logo with the having the, like Utah in the negative space of U. Like I think it's a much better look than they had when they were coming in from D2. And moves like that are always going to help you get folks coming in. So with the conference, how many playoff teams do you think the conference could potentially get in? And how far in the playoffs do you think they could potentially go?
Yeah, I think it's I don't know if it's going to be a two bid league this year. I think they're going to have Eastern Kentucky again is my favorite, but I think you could have Abilene Christian. Um, I think you could probably have Central Arkansas as 7-win team, so they're going to be on the bubble. There could be maybe another 7-win team that pops up as well, but and some of this might have to do with just media wise and maybe not giving this conference enough credit where there is only one team ranked in the top 25 and in multiple different top 25s, and there's a few other teams getting votes. And so if you're Central Arkansas and you do finish 7-4, but you might have a lack of ranked wins just because people aren't ranking the other teams in your conference. And so I think maybe only one team, possibly one other team for an at-large bid, but you know, with what is there 14 at-large bids to go around, the Big Sky is probably going to take 4 of those this year. I think the Valley is going to at least get 4 teams in, and so that's 3 more at-large bids. The CAA might get 2 at-large bids. The SoCon might get 2 at-large bids. So we're already at 11 there. The Southland probably gets 1 at-large bid. There's 12. And so, there could be room for that second place United Athletic Conference team, especially because, the Patriot League won't be a 2-bid league this year. So that knocks one down. The CAA won't be a 5-bid league this year. I highly doubt that. And so I guess if I'm talking, now that I'm talking through that, there could be room for that second place United Athletic Conference team. It's just, again, if you can get to 8 wins, if you're Abilene, SFA, Central Arkansas. I think if you get to 8 wins, you're probably looking really solid to get in. But 7 wins, you're your resume is fighting up against 5 other teams that also have 7 Division I wins.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting year. Like I said, I'm just excited as a fan because it's finally a real conference, not a conglomeration of crap, as Jamie Williams likes to put it. That's the Big South and OVC, and yeah, that logo is ugly. So just I'm going to pull out. I'm going to like broaden the view. Someone's talk full FCS, and if you guys are watching, if you have any full FCS questions, you can drop them in here as well. But we talked about SFA last year, and we talked about how they failed to live up to the media hype with the preseason ranking and all that, and then they got completely shellacked week 0 in Montgomery against Jacksonville State. Who in the top 25 preseason top 25 this year do you think is falling victim or could fall victim to that same thing?
Yeah, because I'm pretty, because obviously the media darlings this year are Furman and Idaho. I think, are both of them going to finish in the top 8? Maybe not, but I also don't see a fall from grace that SFA saw last year. Furman has everything in place to be really, really good. Basically their entire team coming back. I do have more questions about Idaho. I have questions about their front 7 and also their offensive line. But I think their schedule sets up where they can, they have a lot of favorable games at home against ranked opponents like Montana State. And so I think Idaho is going to be solid. They might not end up making it to, the semifinals or anything like that, but I still think them being a top 10 team is warranted. I'm looking at, some teams that are, usually ranked. I think Rhode Island is a team that I'm seeing a lot of people putting in their top 25, me included. I don't know if Rhode Island is going to end up finishing in the top 25, just because, I think they have offensively, they should be fine with Kasim Hill coming back at quarterback, but, defensively might have a few more questions. I don't know. It's tough to say because I'm one of those people that are hyping, these teams up and ranking them high. And I'm not going to, rank a team if I can't defend them. And I think there's a great argument for Idaho to be in the top 8. I think there's a great argument for Furman to be in the top 8. UC Davis, a team that didn't make the playoffs last year. I have them in the top 20. Youngstown State, another team that I don't have that didn't make the playoffs last year. I have them in my top 20. Like I feel pretty comfortable right now making the argument of why they should be, ranked where they're at. And so it's hard for me to kind of say who's going to be that fall from grace this year.
Yeah, I mean SFA was pretty epic in how badly they just fell from grace. But
Well, and even but with again, it goes back to like SFA. It's not like when I was typing up why I have SFA number 8 or 9. Like it's not like I'm like, I just have faith that they're going to be like really, really good. But I don't really know who's going to be good, like who's going to step up. But like you knew, like SFA was coming off of a breakout season. They nearly beat Sam Houston, I believe, or was it UIW, in the playoffs in 21. Who was that? SFA almost beat someone. But they returned like 10 of their top tacklers. Trey Self was back. Xavier Gibson was back. And so like it's not like people were just throwing darts putting SFA that high. Like there was a legit reason to put them that high. But again, it's just managing those expectations and making sure everything clicks.
Yeah, and I think too their previous season performance, like the games they lost, were what put them where they were versus the games they actually won. And I do kind of wonder if that's the same thing with Idaho. That's I mean that's my concern. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like Idaho. I know Chris Hammond is watching this, and I do like Idaho. I think with them having Eck coaching there, like there's a lot of upside to it. But I just feel like they're in a very similarly set position that SFA was, but they also I think have more talent than SFA did last year, and they haven't seen the coaching turnover as to the point that SFA saw last year. We did the just again keeping out at a broader FCS level. I'm going to Brookings for Montana State, South Dakota State. I personally think that's going to be the match in Frisco this year. I think they're both two teams that probably have the least amount of questions. I don't know. Maybe Montana State has some. But I think that's my pick. And yes, it's a pretty safe pick since everybody's putting, Montana State 2 or 3 in their polls. And obviously the Jackrabbits are number 1. Who do you think will be in Frisco? Or even better, who do you want to be in Frisco besides who do you think? Like who head versus heart? what would be the match you want to see in Frisco, but then also what does your head say? Who will be there?
My heart says I would like to see Montana play Furman in the national title game with Furman winning. That's what I want to see happen. I know that's not going to happen. Why I want to see that happen is because I think what you want if you're just an FCS follower or a fan media for good engagement and good storyline is to have either South Dakota State, North Dakota State, Montana, one of those teams in Frisco, and then you have a team that's not in the Big Sky or the Valley or even the CAA win the national title. And so Furman beating Montana in Frisco would be my dream scenario. I'm not just saying that to troll Kevin. Like I just think they would be good for the FCS. It'd be fun. It'd be a great environment, and it would be something different. Oh, a SoCon team just won the national title. Like everything's wide open. That's not going to happen. I think the safe bet is a rematch from last year, South Dakota State versus North Dakota State. But again, how does the bracket shake out? Where I think NDSU is probably going to go 9-2 this year. Maybe that drops them to the 4 seed, and then Montana State is the 3 seed, and 11-0 William and Mary with the Power 5 win is the 2 seed, and then Montana State goes to William and Mary, runs roughshod over them again. South Dakota State beats NDSU at home in the other semifinal game, and it is South Dakota State versus Montana State. I could easily see that, but if I had to, put $20 down on what the matchup is going to be, the safest bet is a rematch from last season, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, that was such a great atmosphere too. Probably one of the best ones I've been to for a game. Just it was so electric, and of course, I think everybody there who was neutral was rooting against the Bison just because you want to see. It's like rooting against Alabama when you watch FBS. Like you want to see Goliath fall. One last question on that on the national championship. Last year was on Sunday. A lot of folks initially weren't happy with it. I think it worked out pretty well. I think everybody made it work, although Texas liquor laws don't always work very well for games on Sunday. This year it's going to be on Sunday again. Do you, after what happened last year, do you like it? And two, do you just think this is going to be the way going forward for the national championship?
Yeah. So last year I didn't mind it at the time when it was announced. I know a lot of people they ended up being right. We're saying going up against the NFL was stupid, but my argument was, okay, the last time the game was on ABC, not counting the spring, it did 2.7 million viewers. When it's on ESPN2, on a Saturday morning, it's like 1.3. And so my theory was, yes, it's going up against the NFL, but just basic TV logic, ABC is going to draw huge eyeballs. And so if you can get somewhere between 1.3 and 2.7, then it's a win. Well, it got like 1.1 million 1.07 million viewers or something like that. So obviously that test or whatever didn't work out. And I was under the impression and thought that, okay, it didn't work out. TV viewership declined. It wasn't increased exposure for the FCS title game. Just put it back on ESPN2 at 11 a.m. The usual time slot, because that's what's going to get more exposure. That's not the decision that was made. I know, some FCS commissioners wanted to do try a Friday night game, but there was no great TV slots for that. And I also know Frisco wasn't a huge fan of that either, because they were afraid that, less people would come, because if you have a game on a Saturday or a Sunday, then you get people there Friday and Saturday, compared to, maybe people don't come until Thursday and then they leave Saturday. So Frisco didn't want Friday night. Saturday at 11 a.m. fan wise for the people there and the players, 11 a.m. kickoff is just not fun. But then you have, the Sunday game where, you're going up against the NFL and your viewership goes down. And so it's a balance of, from my impression, if people are like, oh, the FCS is so dumb for doing this is not an FCS decision. It's an ESPN decision. I'm under the impression that the FCS commissioners wanted to, okay, let's try Friday night. Okay, if that doesn't work, maybe let's just do Saturday. But ESPN said, no, we really like this game on Sunday on ABC. And to me, I wrote a column about that saying I think it's a disservice to the FCS, because it's being treated as filler content that, oh yeah, we could just throw this game on ESPN or on ABC on a Sunday. We're fine with only getting 1 million viewers because we can also put something something else ESPN2 on 11 a.m. Saturday that will get 1 million as well. And so the lump sum viewers for us for a TV market, is better if we do it this way. But you're taking 300,000 less eyeballs if you move it to Sunday. And so that's why I don't like this, because I think you're kind of treating the FCS as filler. But you can also, I get the other side of the argument because like it's 300,000 viewers. Like, is that really that big deal to the FCS? TV contracts are irrelevant in the world of the FCS. And so if you're a fan there, you probably like the 1 p.m. kickoff more. If you're players and coaches, you probably like the 1 p.m. kickoff more, even if it is on a Sunday. And at the end of the day, like, yes, we want to grow the FCS brand and all that, but like 300,000 viewers, is that going to make or break the FCS title game? Not really. So I get that side of the argument, but I just think they should push to have the most attention on this game as possible. And I think you do that by either moving it to Friday night or just putting it back on ESPN2 at 11 a.m.
No, yeah, no, I agree. It was a mixed thing for me. Like I said, like I think it worked okay as a fan. It was kind of a pain having to fly home after the game, and hope there wasn't any shenanigans. But it's what it is. It's just, I had plans for Thursday night up in Dallas this year. I'm not going to go up now, like on Thursday, because that's just a long weekend, but that's just me. But anyway, Sam, no, I appreciate you taking the time out. I know preseason is busy for you getting everything ready. Thanks for coming in and talking about the United, or I don't want to call it the Yuck or the UAC, but there's not really a good abbreviation to do it with this. Real quick though, and I would be shocked if anybody who watches or listens to this doesn't follow Hero Sports in some way, shape, or form. But if you want to go ahead and plug Hero Sports and plug your socials, let's do it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm on Twitter at Sam Herder FCS, and then our website is herosports.com. And we specifically cover FCS and Group of 5 football on Hero Sports, and so there could be some fans listening that coverage could be relevant down the future, our G5 coverage. That's probably a whole different podcast right there. But yeah, FCS and Group of 5 coverage on herosports.com, and then I'm on Twitter at Sam Herder FCS.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks for coming on. And also, folks, if this is your first time stumbling across this YouTube channel, make sure you like and subscribe. There's so many different shows for the FCS on here. We have the main show on Sunday with Matt, Kyler, and Jamie. You got the new name coming, Wax Sun coverage. You still got Cocky Nation for Jacksonville State, even though they are FBS. We just like Brandon too much that we can't get rid of him. You've got the fight on Montana. You've got the J and Keith. There's so many great shows, and we also can't forget Jackrabbit Illustrated and the B Team. Although I am South Dakota State's favorite podcaster, and Matt Tollefson did say that on Sunday, so I have it on record. But anyway, so if you haven't done it, like and subscribe, follow FCS Fans Nation on Twitter, join the Facebook group, follow myself, the Rev SFA on Twitter. FCS is still, while it's growing, it's still, grassroots, and folks like, you who are the fans are what helps it grow. So once again, Sam, thank you for coming on. Really greatly appreciate it. And we will talk to you guys later.